My next guest says a look at Chicago's recent history can help explain how we got where we are. The name Mayor Daley is synonymous with decades of ups and downs across the city of Chicago. There was the father, Richard J. Daley, who ran this city from 1955 until his death in 1976. But it was his son, Richard M. Daley, who helped shape the city as we know it today. He served from 1989 to 2011, breaking the record of his legendary father. Perhaps no one got a closer eye inside the Daley administration than my guest, Forrest Claypool, who served as Daley's chief of staff twice, as well as CEO of the Chicago Park District. He later served as head of the Chicago Transit Authority and Chicago Public Schools. He's out with a new book. It's called The Daley Show, Inside the Transformative Reign of Chicago's Richard M. Daley. Forrest Claypool joins us this morning in our WGN studios. You didn't do enough during those administrations. Congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And you and I go back a long way just to knowing each other. But
yes.
you noted in the book, which I've read from cover to cover, that in his record-setting 22 years, Daley reshaped the city in a variety of ways. We'll talk about that. But you also note he didn't end the corruption, police misconduct, and many of his accomplishments were paid through deficit spending and some questionable sales of city assets. We'll talk about those as well, like parking meters. But people forget the Skyway, the city garages were the successes of the Daley administration at the cost of what would come back to haunt the city as long-term pain?
No, I don't think so. I think if you look at the as you point out, there's, like in any 22-year administration, it's not all success. And the book covers all the scandals. It covers including hired truck scandal, hiring fraud that brought the FBI to the mayor's door. So all the warts are there too, but the overall arc though is about how remarkably transformative his reign was. And I think people forget what Chicago was like in 1989. It was roiled by violent crime, murder, the highest level of murders in history. There was a teacher strike every 2 years for 18 years. The city schools were bankrupt. As you recall, the Reagan education secretary came to town and said they were the worst schools in the United States. Jobs were leaving. John McCarran, who was the Chicago Tribune urban affairs columnist, said when he was covering the city at that time that the question was, would the last person to leave Chicago please turn out the lights? Chicago Tribune called Chicago an economic invalid, a city on the brink. And that's the city that he inherited. And 22 years later, when he left office, Foreign Policy magazine ranked Chicago 6th as the most important city in the world.
But here, I want to just step in because, as you wrote, when he took office, Chicago was in that description you just gave, which in the book you call an advanced state of atrophy. But you also note then, we're on the brink once again. So all the Daley changes, the positive changes and reforms, why did those not stick?
That's actually why I wrote the book, because like many people, I was upset about what's happened to the city since. And we're heading back in the opposite direction. The schools are in turmoil. Businesses are leaving, people are leaving. Go down Chicago, you see homeless encampments and graffiti. Yes, the problem is that we don't learn the lessons of the past. And what were the things that Rich Daley as a leader did? What policies did he pursue that turned around a great metropolis? I think our leaders today need to understand a bit about history, because if you don't understand the past, then you're doomed to repeat its failures, but you also don't follow the things that got us into a positive situation.
There's a saying, I'm sure you know, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This design of the city is strong city council and weak mayor. That was not the design of the Daley administration, father or son. And I'm sort of curious, did power, the absoluteness of it, get to Daley's head so much? And I'm thinking of the night of Meigs Field when he wanted to create a park, couldn't make it happen. So we all woke up one morning to the headlines, which showed some nice big X's and owners of a lot of corporate planes who went, I can't get my plane off. Did power go to his head?
I think the answer is yes. I spent a lot of time, a couple of chapters on the scandals. That's of course one, but there was the more serious ones that actually sent dozens and dozens of people to prison. And I think it's not an accident that occurred, or a coincidence that occurred when he was riding his highest, when he was at the peak of his popularity and power, when the city council was not just passing his agenda, but was passing it 50-0. And that's when the scandals broke. And I think it does, as you point out, brings into Lord Acton's maxim that power tends to corrupt, but absolute power, which is essentially what he had at that point. He was like a monarch. absolute power does pull government towards corruption, and the book documents how that happened.
Let's take it to the fifth term, because you write about each of his terms, but you wrote that he was at that point at the peak of his power. But you also write, this was fascinating to me, that he had changed. The people around him had changed, how he did his work changed, and there were consequences to all of this. You write that the line between governing and politics was blurring. What did that mean?
He had turned over whole swaths of the government to a political organization, the Hispanic Democratic Organization, which had become his sort of political arm for patronage, for contracts, the hired truck. And they put their people running all those programs, or running the hired truck program, which became a giant scandal, doing all the patronage hiring. And so there was really no line anymore between the government and politics. And it was that organization and the less sophisticated people he had put in charge that led him into those scandals, which almost cost him his mayoralty, and at one point perhaps would have cost him, at least threatened to cost him his freedom, because he had to hire a white-collar defense attorney to defend him when the FBI was in his office asking about corruption that oozed out of every crevice of the government.
Let's talk about housing for a moment, and I know when you do interviews on this book, people say we're as segregated now as we ever were. But here's the piece of the book they leave out when they ask you that question, which is, let's remember that it was Richard J. Daley, the father, who built all of that public housing because he wanted to put minorities over there. It was Richard M. Daley who tore it down. I mean, what an amazing mirror image of each other, but yet we remain segregated.
Correct, yeah, and I spent several chapters talking about that because it is a remarkable story. And I think one of Mayor Daley's greatest accomplishments was raising the high-rises his father built to contain the black community. It was really a remarkable, and really almost a miracle that he pulled that off. I don't think any other city mayor could have wiped out that cancer that was across the city. People forget these toxic high-rises were dominated by criminality and poverty and just hopelessness. And he replaced that, and it's still being replaced to this day, by healthier mixed-in communities. And many of those communities are more integrated than they were in the past. So we've made progress, but Chicago clearly is still a very segregated city.
It seems Richard M. Daley wrestled with the legacy and the honor he held for his own father. Why wouldn't he have that? But at the same time, when he came into office, he understood the other pieces of it, like hiring family and friends and stepping into that. He seemed to find the value of that. How did he wrestle with the honor and legacy of his father?
Yeah, I mean, he basically honored many aspects of his father's legacy, but others he carved his own path. And I know we talk about those, tearing down the public housing high-rises was certainly one. He was actually kind of a social liberal. People were shocked when he came out, and I talk about it like this in the book, when he came out as the Grand Marshal of the Gay Pride Parade, the first mayor that ever done it, at a time when people were sort of like gasping at that, and some of his more cautious aides were aghast. He also came out in support of abortion rights, and people are used to this very socially conservative dad going to mass every day, and so it kind of turned heads that his son was kind of a social liberal.
Yeah, I remember being with him once in a meeting and showing him around for people, and Danny Sotomayor was there, who was an AIDS activist, who blew a whistle in his face, and Daley just said, "I see you, Danny." Then somebody else who I introduced him to wouldn't shake his hand, and Daley looked at me and said, "You know, Paul, where I come from, even if you don't like somebody, you shake their hand." He was a pretty emotional person in addition to being tough.
Yeah, and I think that's why people liked him. I think he wore his emotions on his sleeve and his love of Chicago on his sleeve, and that carried him a long way. I think the reason I think he survived those scandals was precisely because of that no one ever accused him of any financial wrongdoing. He never profited from any of these scandals or anything. And he wore his emotions on his sleeve and his love of Chicago on his sleeve. And that went a long way. That level of sincerity went a long way.
You're right that we're just about out of time. The media got tougher on him in his later terms.
Yeah.
Would that have made a difference if they had been tougher on him from day one?
I don't know. His coverage early on was reverential, and deservedly so, because of the extraordinary things that he did. But Chicago is a corruption-rich environment, so a lot of the reporting was justified. But towards the end, I don't know. I think some of it was not fair towards the very end, but it was certainly there was a lot to work with there.
All right, out of time. Any word from the Daley Boys?
Not sure what you mean by that.
John, meaning John.
Bill. I've talked to them. They were certainly aware of the book. Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Aware of the book. Forrest Fable, congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Paul.